In December 1998, a Delta rocket lifted off from Cape Canaveral, carrying the Mars Climate Orbiter. This $125 million robotic probe was intended to study the Martian atmosphere and serve as a communications relay for future missions. A lethal software error sat hidden in the mission's files. NASA's navigation team calculated trajectory in metric newtons, but Lockheed Martin engineers expressed thruster force in customary pounds force. Without a conversion step, every trajectory adjustment on the way to Mars was off by a factor of 4.45. Instead of entering orbit at a safe altitude of 226 kilometers, the orbiter passed as close as 57 kilometers to the Martian surface. The spacecraft was torn apart by the heat and friction of the planet's atmosphere. This failure occurred despite NASA's own requirement to use metric units. It reveals the danger of the interface between two measurement systems operating simultaneously within the same engineering project. Nearly the entire industrialized world operates uniformly on the metric system. For more than 95% of the globe, these units govern daily life. Only 3 nations have yet to adopt it as their primary standard: the United States, Liberia, and Myanmar. Because of its economic and technological reach, the United States is the only holdout capable of turning this isolation into a matter of global consequence. The U.S. technically legalized the metric system in 1866 and declared it the preferred system for trade in 1988. Yet most Americans still buy milk in gallons, weigh themselves in pounds, and build their homes on 16-inch stud spacing. This persistent contradiction raises a central question. Why did the world's leading superpower trap itself in a permanent, hybrid state? The customary units Americans use today trace their lineage back through 2 millennia of European history. Roman legions marched out the first miles, Saxon farmers defined the foot as 36 barleycorns, and King Henry I supposedly set the yard as the distance from his nose to his thumb. Thomas Jefferson proposed a cleaner alternative in 1790. Years before the French formally adopted the metric system, Jefferson submitted a plan for a fully integrated decimal system of weights and measures for the new United States. Jefferson's plan succumbed to a Congress occupied by the Northwest Indian War and a massive land rush. Surveyors were already using Old English chains and rods to map the frontier, and the momentum of existing tools outweighed the need for scientific reform. America's first opportunity for a rational measurement standard was lost to simple bureaucratic neglect and the press of more urgent business. By the 1970s, the world was standardizing. American manufacturers faced a mounting tax in the form of dual engineering, forced to design products twice to meet international specifications. Companies like DuPont found they could save thousands of dollars a year simply by switching to metric packaging and avoiding dual labeling. Congress responded with the Metric Conversion Act of 1975, but the law had a structural flaw. Lawmakers placed the word voluntary at the center of the policy, allowing the public and industry to opt out. This created a massive coordination problem. No single lumber mill would voluntarily cut metric-sized studs if they remained incompatible with the existing American housing stock. When metric units appeared optionally on road signs and weather reports, a vocal segment of the public responded with fierce skepticism, viewing the numbers as an unwelcome imposition on daily life. Without a strict legal mandate to enforce the transition, the policy of voluntary conversion collapsed under the weight of even mild public visibility. In 1982, the Reagan administration abolished the U.S. Metric Board. The agency had never been empowered to mandate anything, making it an easy target for a government looking to cut programs perceived as bureaucratic overreach. Measurement units eventually became a proxy for cultural identity. Opponents began framing the metric system as an alien European standard, contrasting it with traditional units described as organic or human in scale. This sentiment survives today in the internet-native phrase freedom units, a half-ironic marker of national identity that treats the use of miles and pounds as an act of patriotic nonconformity. Ultimately, a basic standard of mathematical measurement was successfully transformed into a lasting marker of ideological allegiance. Below the consumer surface, the U.S. actually did go metric in its military, its pharmaceutical labs, and its automotive factories. Most modern car engines are now measured in liters and manufactured to metric tolerances. However, operating in a hybrid environment creates significant risks. In 1983, Air Canada Flight 143, a brand new Boeing 767, became the first in its fleet to track fuel in kilograms instead of pounds. When the plane's sensors failed, ground crews calculated the fuel manually. Accustomed to older aircraft, they used a conversion factor for pounds. They unknowingly loaded less than half the fuel required for the journey. At 41,000 feet, both engines flamed out. The powerless 767 was forced to glide to an emergency landing at a disused base. The unmanaged coexistence of both systems creates the primary danger. In a mixed-unit environment, personnel often fall back on old habits when handling new equipment. The most persistent costs of this hybrid system occur in American hospitals, where weight-based medication dosing depends on correct unit conversions. Clinical medicine is fully metric, measuring drug concentrations in milligrams and patient weights in kilograms. However, most American parents and many staff members instinctively default to pounds and ounces. In one case, a 2-year-old's weight was entered as 35 kilograms, roughly 77 pounds, instead of his actual weight of 35 pounds. The child received a dosage calculated for someone more than twice his size, leading directly to a loss of consciousness. Medical boards recommend transition policy directly translates into a steady statistical stream of preventable medical errors. The United States has settled into an uneven equilibrium. High-stakes fields like aerospace, medicine, and international trade have largely gone metric, while the daily consumer experience remains fiercely customary. To maintain this status quo, the country absorbs massive invisible costs: duplicated engineering, lost export competitiveness, and hospital dosing errors. These frictions are tolerated simply to avoid the political difficulty of a mandatory national conversion. America's measurement holdout persists as a byproduct of 2 centuries of political gridlock and the inherent limitations of a purely voluntary policy. This comprehensive analysis is derived from the first book of the massive 30-volume series, To Preserve, Protect, and Defend the Soul of America. The book is titled Volume 1, America's Healthcare Crisis and Broken Public Institutions, authored by Sue B. Howell. The book is available to purchase in all Amazon bookstores worldwide right now. Please subscribe and press the bell icon to get notifications.